It's right there, and then right there, and a bunch of other right there's around Adamant. And she was our archivist for the village of Adamant. She passed away about 10 years ago, but all of her records that she kept, photos and newspaper clippings and ephemera, this is all photocopied from what she had, and it's now with the town of Calais. So Allison and I have been meeting at the Calais Town Hall and looking through these archives. So we invite, if you'd like, to come to this table over here and the counter where all the food was laid out, and just take a little perusal before we do the presenting and discussion part of the evening.
Good. And just be careful that you have
Please, yes.
that you have clean hands and you don't have any liquid around
Yeah,
the scrapbooks.
leave your food and beverages behind us, and there's a bathroom here and a kitchen sink here if you feel like you've got a little settled in.
Good. We'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah. That you can look afterward too a little bit, but it'll take some.
I moved away, but I said.
And about, I'm trying to kill time here. but-
Yes, right, that's what I was gonna collect the cup in like 45 seconds, but.
It's been wonderful working with her. She's really focused, and as we went through boxes and boxes and boxes of material that Lois Toby had, not only was it enlightening, but Julia really does have this wonderful focus, so I think this is gonna be a great presentation. Thank you for doing that, Julia.
You're welcome. Thank you, Allison, for inviting me into workshop. Let's see.
And, because a number of you have ancestors who were part of all this. You know, I see names that were on that drama over there. Some of the names of people, Ben Hatch when he was probably a little boy, and a number of others who have probably passed down some of that information to you who are now here. So I hope that you will speak up also, give us some background. All right.
And whether it's ancestors or neighbors who are no longer here with us, or whatever stories you might have that are now history. And yeah, that's another piece of, yeah, here we are in the schoolhouse, which I believe was Calais' number 9. I think there were 14 schoolhouses in Calais, although where we are situated, as you may know, is very, very close to East Montpelier. So the majority of the students who came here were from East Montpelier, rather than Calais, but it's in Calais, as with many things in Adamant. Boundaries are what they are.
Yes, point of order. Adamant is not just in Calais, it is also in East Montpelier. I live in downtown Adamant, and I live in East Montpelier, and the line is like right next to me.
Yeah.
So it's a circle like this, lots of us live in East Montpelier. So we just want people to know. We are here.
I also live in East Montpelier and in Adamant, but across the pond from Allison. We're gonna start off, well, also, yeah, so here we're in this place of learning to learn about our own history or our neighbor's history, why is Adamant where it is, and such. And one other piece is that all of these things that Lois collected, some of them, and many that I'm gonna reference, are interviews with other people in Adamant or retellings of various stories and pieces of history. So, you know, history isn't what happened in the past, it's the stories that we tell about the past. So you are also invited to share the stories as your memories jogged, or you have something that's related to what you're about to hear as we go along. So it's not really a lecture, a question and answer, it's also a conversation. So this is from Elbridge and Lois Toby from May 2nd, 1991, A Brief History of Adamant for Planning Subcommittee Report. I don't know what they were working on in the subcommittee, but this is what Elbridge and Lois put together. Francis West cleared land here in the spring of 1787. Next to the Montpelier line, which is now East Montpelier, there's another boundary that shifted. He thought he was building in Montpelier. He left for a while, and the Wheelock brothers came to Calais in June the same year. As they stayed in the area, it is claimed they were the first permanent settlers. Now, in history, firsts are often troublesome, but this is what Elbridge and Lois shared. A road was made in the early 1800s called the stage route. It came from Canada. One of the stops was at the A. Bliss place, the Jesse Scott house. There's also many references to houses who lived there a long time ago, and then who lived there when someone is retelling this history, and now we're many decades later. So if anyone has the reference point, if I don't give it of, oh, this house I know is over here, and now so-and-so lives there, you're welcome to add that in.
And Gail might know that house, the Scott's house, where Fred Blakely lives now.
Where who lives?
Fred Blakely and Marianne Billiman, right on the corner. That was the Scott's house, wasn't it? Across
Jesse
from you?
Scott.
Oh, you can't hear.
She can't hear too well.
Allison,
Jesse
that's accurate.
Scott House.
Oh, the Jesse Scott house?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about this? I thought we were talking about internet.
Greater
We
Adam.
are.
What?
Greater Adam.
Oh, what did she want to know?
Where was it?
Where was it? It's right up across the road.
Across from you, right.
So it's been there.
Where is
It
there?
was an inn.
Oh,
On the stage
It was
route.
on the stagecoach
oh.
out of Adamant going towards Hardwick.
Right.
And, yeah, it was an inn.
It's an inn, we didn't know
And,
that.
yeah,
And
I'm sorry,
that's okay, and if it's hard to hear, please, I can project a little more. Does
For
anyone-
Gail to make it sense to sit here, do you want to move here? Forward, sit.
Want to sit up front?
So what was the stagecoach? Is it what's now County Road? Is
What's,
that
what's,
what
no,
Center,
No.
center.
No.
Center
Center.
Road, and then it,
Did Chantal
Okay.
bring her,
there we go.
Where are the bags? Did you ever find them? Or they're there, right there.
I think we have a microphone on its way.
right,
Ah.
Sandal is not here, so there's,
Some setup.
nobody
Okay.
knows how to do it.
Well,
Oh, no, Paul's on it.
yeah. So you might all be more familiar with the Kent Tavern, which is also on the stagecoach route. So we came through Center Road, through Adamant, up to Kent's Corner, and on to Canada, and Boston at the other end.
Excuse me, if there's somebody who can see, knows anything about electronics, here it is.
I've not set this up
Figure out how
before.
to set it up.
Yeah.
I don't know how it works either, but I can help you do trying to do that.
Thanks for bearing with that. Sandal, who knows all about this, isn't here today, but provided the equipment. Okay, so maybe you've all had a little discussion about various houses in various places and where they may have been and still are. So, okay, Adamant was first known as South Calais before granite was found in the surrounding hills. Later, it was renamed Sodom. The first post office was opened under the name of Sodom on July 17th, 1893, which was a couple years before this schoolhouse was built. Let's see, and a little bit about the quarries as well. We're gonna get to that. All right, I'm gonna move away from Elbridge and Lois's brief history of Adamant for a moment and go to one that is pretty hard to read because it's a copy of a copy of a copy. Do you remember the name of the person, Allison?
Oh, Marion Curry.
Marion Curry.
That sounds familiar.
Ellen Hill's mother.
Ellen Hill's mother.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So this is a history of Adamant by Ellen Hill's mother, Marion Curry. And I'll read a little section from that. Here's something that might sound familiar. The road climbing the hill west of the crossroads of Adamant was a stage route from Canada, and the house just above Adamant, now owned by Andrew Scott, which again, this was decades ago. So the same house we were talking about earlier was a stop on that route and bore the sign A. Bliss 1823. D.P. Thompson in Loch Amsden, or the Schoolmaster, an old book dated 1847, says, quote, "I saw a little fellow from Sodom Corner," unquote, page 76. I don't know what the rest of the story is about, but there's a reference to Sodom. The opening of the quarries in the 1880s brought people and a measure of prosperity. And as I was just learning about local geology this weekend, I want to note part of why Adamant was settled in the way that it was because of the granite, brought granite industry here. And that granite formed many millions of years ago as a lot of geologic shifting was happened. Granite occurs when there's all of this pressure and heat happening. There's like these little tiny bubbles of magma that then cool before they reach the surface of the earth. And as erosion happens, the less hard rock erodes away, and that's how we start to find granite in this area. And of course, Barrie got much bigger around the granite industry because there was much more of that ancient magma that cooled into granite. And if you look at a geological map, you can see Adamant and these little plutons, what they're referred to as, of granite. And behind us, there are, if you canoe around Adamant Pond, out these windows, you'll find pieces of granite that were not up to snuff for the industry and left behind that are covered in moss and trees growing in the lake. So that's just to bring us back many millions of years ago, but now we're in the 1880s. Granite workers came from Scotland and Canada. A boarding house was built near the quarry. Other houses were built, and a post office on the stage route was given the name by which the place had come to be called, Sodom. Barney's Hall was a gathering place for dancers, plays, and religious services, which you may know or may have driven past on your way here, which is now part of the Adamant Music School. 40 or more men were employed on the quarries: the Lawrence Quarry, the Eureka Quarry, the Thompson Quarry, the Lynch Quarry. 6 in all are mentioned in old records. It is recorded that the North Haverhill Granite Company of New Hampshire erected a derrick, the mast of which was 59 feet high. A stone weighing 20 tons and drawn by 22 horses was taken from one of the quarries. A news item of June 17th, 1896 says, quote, "There is a fine stone being worked in East Montpelier, which came from the Eureka Quarry in Sodom and is going to Virginia. The stone weighs 8 tons and is a shaft 2 1/2 feet at the base and is 22 feet long. It is said to be without a flaw." Stones quarried in Sodom were drawn by horses to Barrie and Montpelier, and some 50 horses were stabled in the village. The blacksmith shop was a busy place. And you may have looked up earlier at some of these photos, which were also part of Lois Kilby's archives that are now is being stewarded by the town of Calais. Let's see. You can look afterward more closely, but Ben Hatch's sawmill and blacksmith, and he operated.
If you bushwhack around the quarry down the road, you know, past the music school, on the east side, in the woods, you can still see a lot of that old machinery,
Yes.
including part of that huge dairy.
Yeah.
Technically, you're trespassing, just to say. But,
Land.
it's the music school, if you ask. There's been a little bit of issues about whether people should go back there.
Some of it is music school, some of it is the Frank Sukama Memorial Arts Group. There's two different groups that own, the quarry is owned by the Michael Sukama group. The spring area is owned by the music school.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, if you want to see those pieces of granite that were quarried but not removed from Adamant any further, you can canoe in the Adamant pond right here, and you'll see some piled up at the edges.
You can also continue up Martin Road and look down over and you'll see some tailing piles down there.
Yeah, more tailing piles of granite down Martin Road up this way. So there's a little more details about the quarries and their beginnings. Alright, so we had a question about why this place was called Sodom, and clearly we're not giving a presentation about Sodom history right now, we're calling it Adamant history because that is the present name. And I imagine most of you here have some version of that story. And all of our stories are going to be versions because none of us were there at the time. So if anyone wants to give some input of why this place was called Sodom and why it was changed and why was it changed to Adamant, you're welcome to share it. And Allison has a microphone so we can all hear what you have to say, and that'll come to you.
You tell us the
There's so
version.
many stories.
Yeah, we started.
We'll end.
Reference to Sodom and Gomorrah. That's all I have to say.
We've heard reference of Sodom and Gomorrah. Thank you. Any other details of why this place was called Sodom? Here, I'm gonna not be the one that
I'll just say there's one legend that I find highly unlikely, that there were highwaymen who would attack stagecoaches and roll them into the pond, which is supposedly also why it was called Wicked Pond, and that it was because of their wickedness that it was called Sodom. But I find that I don't know, it's somewhat unlikely.
Well, I haven't come across in Lois's archives anything about stagecoaches being rolled into the pond, but
Well, Lucy referred to stagecoaches in Sodom Pond.
yeah.
Huh.
Which is the same pond. There are many names that change over time, and so you may have seen your trivia questions, and there's a question about what was Sodom called before it was called Sodom Pond, and the answer is Wicked Pond. So, what can you repeat?
Well, yeah, Lucy Wheeler, who lived right sort of on the East Montpelier town line, in that little cabin that's no longer there.
And before that, in the house that you live in.
Rick, why don't you use this here and talk to somebody?
And who owned the house
It's
that
not on probably. It might get feedback though, so I can repeat that.
there's switch on.
Yeah. So if you can, each person who's sharing, you can share it, and I'll do my best to repeat back so more folks can hear.
All right, yeah, so anyway, from what Lucy related to me, I guess, well, she did mention the stagecoaches in the pond, and what were we just?
You're talking about why was this place called Sodom and
Oh,
it was a
yeah.
pond?
I don't ever recall her referring to it as Wicked Pond, but, you know, the stagecoach, you can see how it might get a name of Wicked with your stagecoaches that got ditched into the pond with whether maybe bodies in them or not.
I had heard that too.
I thought that everybody knew the story, but I'm the only one who probably wants to say it, perhaps, I don't know, but incidentally, I was a reporter, and I spent a lot of time in archives studying histories of different places, and the story I'd always heard is because there were 40 men working here, there was a dance hall, and there was a house of ill repute
Right.
here, and there was, it got to be known as Sodom, and it was in Sodom and Gomorrah because of the activities going on there, which I'm sure to the Presbyterians or the, whatever the religion was at the time, were highly outraged, and they decided the name was inappropriate for this wonderful granite, and they thought, what do we call this wonderful granite? And they thought, you think about granite, it's adamant, it's gonna last forever, and that's how adamant got its name. But whether that's apocryphal or not, I don't know, but that's the story I'd always heard. And I seem to recall reading it, but at 79, that blends together, and I actually take my source.
So that's the typical story, but the thing is that the references to this place as Sodom predate the quarries by about 30 or 40 years at least.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, that's the story I always heard. In fact, I think that's in the Western Cape book or something. But yeah, I like the sorry, but the Montpelier Times Argus actually refers to this as Sodom in the 1850s, and you had one from even earlier, from 1947.
Ooh, yeah, let's
Minute
see
ago.
that.
Yeah.
From that, the quote from the book. Yes, 1847.
So
I
there were-
saw
yeah, there
a
were
little
no-
fellow from Sodom Corner.
Yeah, so there were no quarries here at that point. But they still could have been whores. I mean, there was the horse story.
You say horses?
When did the quarry start? In the 1880s.
Wow.
So when was it called South Calais?
Before that, and
Yeah,
it was
the-
not when it was called South Calais. To my understanding, if you look at maps from the time it was called South Calais, there's nothing that says South Calais on the map. In fact, it doesn't say anything, but you can see the crossroads where present-day Adamant is. So, you know, names are changeable, and they're not in all records in the same way. Maybe it was more of an oral reference.
Yeah, well, it's about the most southern part of Calais, the village in Calais. And another thing about the name change was when they were trying to decide about it not calling it Sodom, as I understand, there are two factions. One wanted to keep it as Sodom, and the other faction wanted to change it. And they were very adamant about changing the name. So that's what they came up with.
And I heard that same story, but since we're married, I might have heard that
Well, I'm just passing it on.
And I had heard, and I think this sort of came down from Alice, Mary, and Edwina at the music school, that our adjective adamant comes from the quality, a quality of granite that is hard and unyielding.
Adamant.
So yes, so the kind of granite predated the name of the town.
I just
Minster, I think. Well, that's one of the stories, and I wanted.
Right, but he's saying the adjective came after adamant meant hard rock,
Right.
and adamantine is a type of granite, and so that predated you being adamant about something. Being adamant about it came after because of the rock,
Right.
as opposed.
Oh.
That's what he's saying.
I just want to check in. This is a great discussion. If anyone who cannot hear what's happening, just let me know, and I can try to repeat back the stories we're sharing.
Yeah. If you can repeat that.
Yes.
that'd be great.
Yeah. So Rick was just sharing that. Let's see. That he heard from those who founded the music school about the origins of the word adamant coming out of this certain type of rock that was particularly hard and unyielding granite. So that adamantine predated the adjective adamant.
She has her hand up.
Yes.
Okay, I can give you some dates. You're talking about the, what's the inn, and where I live now, and the Blisses were some of the first, the Blisses and the Wheelocks. And it goes back to the, Abdal Bliss came to my place, 1798, and that's when, well, initially it was a log cabin, but the house the inn was built about that time as well. And also the first town office in Calais was at the junction of Fowler Road and Singleton Road.
I'll do a little recap as best I can. Gail just shared that the first town hall in Calais was at the intersection of Singleton Road and Fowler Road. Okay,
The
so
first one,
did you say
the first town office.
town office? Yes.
With Peter Wheelock. Was it, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna move the conversation a little bit more slowly just because we don't have a mic going to the audience. So we're gonna hear a little repetition for those that can hear both versions and a little bit, at least some details of what each of us are sharing. And Gail also shared that stagecoach house was built quite early, in 17.
Late
Approximately
1700s.
late 1700s, 1790s, and that first settled house, which was a log cabin, was about 1798 as well. Late 7, 8, yes, okay. And
Oh, and the thing that I heard about why the name was changed was that our state representative, whose family still lives around here, but I am too much of a, oh, you? No, then tell your story. Yeah, tell your story.
Well, it's awkward because the tour history that we're gonna have on Thursday has it says Albert was. My family, family lore is that it was Augustus Bliss, and he is my great-great. So his picture is in front of the church. He's the little man. They called him Little Gus, and he was postmaster, and he didn't and he was also the representative in 1905, I think it was. He didn't like his mail coming to Sodom. So that was what my family lore is. So, but both West Kate's book and the tour has this as Albert Bliss. I have no clue who Albert is. So, anyway, that's all I got to say.
I think this works now, so I'm gonna use this mic and then pass it, and we won't get the feedback between the two. All right. Okay, so let's see what this version of how Adamant got its name, which conveniently is not dated and it is not attributed to whoever wrote it. So they'll remain anonymous, and if you disagree with what they said at whatever point they wrote this, you can't take it up with them unless you know somehow. Or you might have some threads of what we've already heard. How Adamant got its name. In the 1880s, several quarries opened in the town of Adamant, which in those days was called Sodom. It had been a sleepy four corners in a farming area known as South Calais or Sodom Corners. With the advent of the quarries, it became a busy hub, employing at least 40 men, with 2 dance halls, a post office, several boarding houses, but no schoolhouse or church. The dance hall, currently Barney Hall, had a bar, pool table, and large dance hall. In 1905, now this says the Albert Bliss family.
We don't know who Albert is.
But can you repeat the name that you know?
Augustus.
Augustus.
And our son is named Gus after him.
Okay, in 1905, we're going to make an edit courtesy of Anne, whose ancestor this references. In 1905, the Augustus Bliss family petitioned the post office to change the name of the town because of unsavory reference to the biblical Sodom, a wicked place. Now you might remember Wicked Pond. That was then and now is still called Sodom Pond and Sodom Pond Road. The new name was hoped to be, quote, euphonious and with a better signification, and a name, quote, perhaps as hard but not as wicked. As we were just saying, the word adamant was originated from adamantine, which is this very hard granite, which is what was quarried here. The name Adamant was chosen in 1905 because of the quarries and the hardness of the stone. It is believed to be the only place of that name in the world. And another piece with that is when some of the people in this community wanted to change the name, and part of that had to do with where the mail was going to be delivered. The post office said, you can change it as long as it is unique and doesn't have a name as any other name in the country, which is a little strange because we know how many town and city names are the same all across the country. But that's what this version shares with us. All right. And Allison, if you want to do some timekeeping too, because we're on the very left of the table still. Yeah. Okay.
What did you just ask?
Oh, some timekeeping.
Yes. We're thinking,
Okay. All right. We're gonna move on to a little bit of specific histories around houses in Adamant. Just a couple of them. So Allison mentioned that she lives in East Montpelier and Adamant. There's the Adamant Co-op, which we probably all think as the center point of the village. And across the road, there's one house by the brook that goes into Sodom Pond, and then there's one other house up the road on Center Road, and that is Allison's, not in Calais anymore.
Town line runs right between.
Yeah, the town line runs right between these two houses, one and two houses up from the co-op building.
That's more helpful.
So Allison's house was built sometime after 1849 when Huldah Brown bought a 1/4 acre piece of land from Nathan Dodge for $10, excluding a barn which he took with him.
oh, he's the one who took it.
So Nathan Dodge was your many times over great-grandfather, and he took the barn with him. Moving buildings was much more common back in the day. It takes a lot to get the materials together to make a building, but so you might as well lift it up and bring it with you if you want it elsewhere. You may all have heard recently how the town of Johnson has moved their brick library out of the floodplain, so it still can be done, and it was much more common in the past. Okay, so this house built after 1849. In 1869, records show the house being sold to John Willard, a real estate man, and then to Alex Dingwall. Neither man lived in the house. Another relative. Yeah. Sally Slayton took up residence in 1870 when her husband apparently decided his wife needed living quarters other than his own. So we think about this timeline, 1870, so this predates the quarries in Adamant, then referred to as Sodom. So there were some women around, but the quarry workers were men. So do what you will with that information. The price of the house in 1870 was $245 and included, quote, the cook stove in the kitchen and the stovepipe attached, cordwood and the stove wood in the dooryard. So I guess Sally Slayton was at least going to be warm in this new house to her. The house then changed hands 4 more times in the next 30 years. Minnie Slayton Hoare sold the co-op building. So Minnie Slayton Hoare was the aunt of Lois Toby, whose papers I'm reading from right now, and she operated the store and post office up until the Adamant Co-op formed and started using the building as a store and post office in a more cooperative manner. In 1935. which, given that it's 2025 now, the co-op is celebrating its 90th year. It was incorporated August 1st, 1935. So I'm sure you've all been to the co-op, but take a visit and think about those pieces of history. The co-op building certainly predates 1935, and it was a store and post office before then. And also living quarters. There's a great little hand-drawn map in some of these papers, which is Lois's recollection of how the store was arranged when her Aunt Minnie was operating it. And it was the store, the post office, and Minnie and her husband's living quarters all on the first floor, and someone else boarded upstairs, a whole family. There's a nice detail in that drawing that shows precisely where the spittoon was at the time. Conveniently near the wood stove. So that's a little bit about the house that Allison lives in Adamant and East Montpelier. Now we move to Callis, the house right next door.
That's the yellow house?
Yes, the yellow house right corner. Yeah, the fixer house. As we heard, yeah. Okay, at the converging dirt roads that pinpoint Adamant, and by a usually tranquil stream that runs for the dam into Sodom. Note, usually, we've had a number of floods in the past couple of years and decades and centuries, stands a yellow house which was once known as, quote, the Red Shop. Many years ago, when Ben Hatch's sawmill burnt down, so we see the photos of the sawmill, and there's Ben Hatch, who was also the blacksmith. So that all burnt down. At that time, let's see, he moved his blacksmith shop into this building. So there's a blacksmith shop in the yellow house. At that time, there were garage doors facing the road and a stairway on the stream side, which led to the living quarters, which were upstairs. When Ben moved his operation up to the house, where this says Dana Poulin now lives, which is where the Bells now live, Lois and Elbridge, Toby, at a later date, lived in the apartment for 2 years shortly after they were married. They were followed by Tommy Chase. And then there's many more transactions up to the present day.
No, the yellow house.
Oh, the
It's the Harley book. You know,
It's Luke Just and Brooklyn, own it now.
Right.
Right. Okay, I'll leave the houses there. All right, there's a little bit of history as well about the main house, meaning the dance hall, Barney Hall. And I'll read this section. Okay, so this is in the winter of 1893, E.C. Kinney, a Presbyterian missionary, started a Sunday school in the upstairs of Barney Hall. So this predates the congregation forming and deciding to all be Methodists. So at the time there's a Presbyterian missionary. I saw a man, this is a letter to Reverend Arthur Hewitt, author of The Old Brick Manse. Kinney, the Presbyterian missionary, in the winter of 1893 or a little thereafter, writes, quote, I saw a man, Mr. Weeks, banking his house for the winter. I asked him the name of the district. He said, Sodom. I asked if they ever had any religious services there. He said, I don't think so, since the other Sodom was destroyed. I tried to get the use of one of the 2 dance halls for a service. The proprietor said that if I wanted it for a dance, it would cost $1.50. But for a religious service, it would cost $3. The dance hall where the Sunday school was held had a pool table in one end. The Sunday school was held in the other end of the same room. The hall is now a parsonage. Quite a change inside and out. So Barney Hall was a parsonage for the Methodist Church for a fairly brief time before the music school formed in Adamant, and Barney Hall became part of the music school as it is today. And let's see, we have a great chronology of the Adamant United Methodist Church, which I won't go through all of it, but you're welcome to look at it afterward. Let's see. So yeah, the Arthur Hewitt preached in Barney's Dance Hall for 4 years, traveling 1.5 hours one way by horse and buggy from Plainfield, earning $3 per Sunday. So that was also on your trivia. So if you want to be looking at that, if trivia is what you're interested in, some of these answers are coming through. So, what's that?
Does it say what years?
Oh yes, this is starting in 1908, so 1908 to 1912. And then the services moved to the schoolhouse, which is where we're standing now, because of a dispute over who would clean the dance hall after Saturday night dances. So you can imagine the state of Barney Hall after there was dancing and drinking and playing pool and yes, probably quite a lot of carousing, and they probably didn't leave it in a state that the congregation found suitable for their services. So they moved from Barney Hall to the schoolhouse. Let's see. In 1913, 1 year after moving to the school, worshipers purchased the old Bliss store, currently the church building. So the Bliss store was the very first store in this village, over here, which you can look at more closely, and try to picture how that store looks like this church and its orientation and all of that. It is the same building, but it has been modified.
You see the strange roof line in that piece, it's still part of the church.
Yeah. Rick is noting some of the roof line matches the present day church. All right. So there are many ways we glean history, and one of those is through local history projects in 7th grade, if you're a Vermonter. So we have here Allison's son Porter interviewed a couple of folks in Adamant as a 7th grader and gleaned some history and stories that way. Porter interviewed Elbridge Toby, Boaz's husband, as well as Marty Schumacher, manager of the Adamant Cooperative Store at the time. What year do you figure? When was Porter in 7th grade?
Well, he's 51 now, so.
If he was 13, so that's the
It would be around 1980 before.
Yeah.
If he's,
Yeah, something like
Around 1980, let's say. Okay. The co-op was started in 1935, but this building was a store during the 20s and in the very early 1900s as well. So it was a store, but not a co-op until 1935. In the 20s, the woman who owned it, Aunt Minnie Hoare, she was a Slayton. So Slayton's another family name that you'll hear quite a bit in the area. She lived here at the store. That's why there are 2 doors. One up here in the front and one in the back. So there is the store entrance and the entrance to her home. I think she lived in the back part of the store, and the store was up here where the present day store is, which also includes where her living quarters were at this point. The post office was right here too, and she used the upstairs for storage and maybe some of her living quarters. Before that, a long, long time ago, when the quarries were growing earlier, there were 3 families who lived here. And Alan Scott, who is still living up the road in the brown house just before the turn to go to Old West Church, he used to live here when he was a boy, and they all worked at the quarries. It was pretty crowded with 3 families living here. Alright, here's some details. Porter asks Marty, how was the co-op started? In 1935, there was the Depression, and there wasn't any money or credit anywhere around. A Reverend Hewitt, who was minister of the church in Adamant, wanted to find a way to help the people who lived here. He thought that if there was a store that was run as a cooperative, people bought items together in bulk, and where people could come to get a large variety of items, that they didn't have to go all the way to Montpelier, they might survive. At that, and it took almost all day to get to Montpelier on their horses, especially if it was mud season. As you probably have all experienced, it still takes longer during mud season, even with a car, to get to Montpelier. Farmers didn't have time to spend the day going to Montpelier, and neither did anyone else. We were quite busy farming and living and surviving. People didn't work in Barrie or Montpelier then. They worked at their houses where they lived. There just wasn't the time, and they had no electric lights then either, and had to work during the day when there was light. So he thought it would be a good idea to have a co-op, and a bunch of people put in $5 each, about 12 families. The only ones still living are the Holdens at the time. Yeah. When the food came in, Clarence Fitch, who was manager then, delivered it around to families, and also people came in. After the first year, they found they had made a profit of $12.30. Was that good back then? Asks Porter. Marty, oh sure, anything that wasn't a debt was good. Which is still the case today for the Adamant Co-op. A year later, the woman who had been running the store, Minnie, wanted to retire, so the co-op members bought the store building from her. So it was really started to help the community. That was before there was any interstate roads or chain stores. Things out here were priced about the same as they would be in Montpelier or Barrie, because there weren't any chain store discount prices, or online store discount prices these days. The same people who started the co-op started the credit union to help the farmers, as well as the Washington Electric Co-op. And there was a question about why is there a village that spans 2 different towns, and Marty answered, mostly they came to Calais area after the Revolutionary War. Calais was chartered in 1781 in Massachusetts, and they drew the lines. And if you look at the towns, you'll see that they're all pretty square. People now want to know why the village is in part at Calais and part in East Montpelier. Well, the lines were drawn before there were any houses. So the settlement pattern was based on the landscape and the water, and eventually the granite helped it grow, and had little to do with someone in Massachusetts drawing squares. So then Porter says, yes, our house is right on the line of East Montpelier and Calais. And Marty goes on about the family name of West settled here, just about where the Bonaminis live, which the Bonaminis don't live there anymore, but that's just up the Adamant Road. He went away to find work for the winter and left his wife, and either she was pregnant or had an infant. Well, if it weren't for some other settlers who came just about that time, I suppose she would have died. West came back in the spring, and then they finally moved away. That was back in the late 1700s. The first Slayton came to Calais was Phineas Slayton, and he had a place up behind the Yankees. That's where Porter got his first Christmas tree when we moved there. Went up with Marty and her horse, and he rode the horseback pulling the tree. They had 9 children, and they eventually all moved down the road to where Milford George lives. And if you look at the graveyard across the road from his house, it's full of Slaytons. He came right after the Civil War, and they are all related to all the Slaytons who lived around here. He bought this right after the war because land was open up then, and you could get it cheap. And there's another version of how Adamant got its name. We've covered quite a bit of that, but if you want to see Marty's version, we can get into that later. Okay, there's the piece where Marty says permission was given to change the name by the post office under the condition that the name chosen be unlike any other post office in the country. And that line that some of us have heard, a name perhaps as hard but not as wicked, was from a newspaper item, July 13th, 1905. Sodom will hereafter be known as Adamant, a name perhaps as hard but not as wicked. All right. We're gonna move on to a little more history of this building here. There's a question on your trivia of what colors it was painted on the outside. Back when it was built in the late 1800s. If anyone wants to guess, you're welcome to.
Red.
Red.
Red with what? There's some options on your trivia.
The only option is red with white.
Red with white. And any other
Yellow
votes?
with red. Or white with red.
Red with white.
Okay, it was yellow and red. That's what we hear.
Cool school.
Yeah, and so you see this here, a classic indicator of where the stove was. That's the stovepipe. And Lois Toby recounted that there was a very big stove right here in front of the chalkboard, and presumably where the teacher, the one-room schoolhouse, had a desk. There, at the height, I might be misquoting this, but I think there could have been like around 40 students. There's some wonderful class photos of all the grades from various points in the early 1800s to the 1930s.
That's like more people than we have in here right now.
Yeah.
Just pointing that out.
Yeah.
Right.
They were very small, but they were little.
Yes, they were little, yes.
Yes.
So yeah, it would have been the smallest students up until 8th grade, which gives the question of if you were at a point in a family where you were able to pursue high school, where do you go? Montpelier.
Or you could go anywhere. Like Berlin students, it depended where you lived and who you could get a ride with, whether it was Montpelier, Northfield, or Barry.
Which, yeah, for the Adamant students, those other two options would have been a little farther. So for all, as far as I know, most in Adamant who had the opportunity to go to high school went to Montpelier. Lois Toby was one of those students.
Did they board there during the
Yes, yeah, Lois boarded there.
What about the Ormsbys?
What about them?
They went to the high school doing that Lois.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that myself, but Ruth is saying that the Ormsbys also did the same. The young students went to high school in Montpelier. And this Ina Slayton as well.
Yeah, and that Lois had once told me that she and Ina, that one time Lois recounted to me that she and Ina Slayton would walk together from Adamant to Montpelier and board during the week and then come home on the weekends. And they had jobs to do at the house, like wash and iron and angles.
So I'm assuming that's Montpelier Seminary, because half of the rooms in the seminary actually were like dorm rooms initially.
No, I think boarding meant at somebody's house.
Yes, yeah.
No, but the seminary itself had some houses.
So, not, just go ahead, Gail. Yeah.
Yeah, my parents went to Montpelier Seminary, they boarded there.
Yeah, so clearly different students who went to Montpelier High School but did not live in Montpelier had different options for boarding. So it sounds like from Gail that your parents boarded at the seminary school. Ina Slayton there were family friends, and so she got to board with people she was already presumably somewhat close with. Lois had to board with strangers, and it sounds like it was hell. Yeah. And so they had to bring everything for the week. So they would go with their books and everything, and Ina and Lois would come back with their dirty laundry, which their mothers would wash on the weekend, and then they'd head to Montpelier again, probably Sunday night.
Sometimes coming back, I think, on a milk truck.
Sometimes on a milk truck or some sort of horse cart if it was not that. So if they were lucky, they could get a ride and didn't have to walk the 8 miles with all their school books and laundry and other supplies.
So was it up what we're calling County Road?
I don't know the specific route that they took at the time. I know Center Road is a much older road.
I think they go about.
Yeah, so Allison's saying that Lois and Ina did take County Road, which I suppose at that point was more traversed, so they had a more chance of getting a ride, which they often had to pay for. Not always, but they often had to pay for it. When I was in 7th grade and had to do a Vermont history project, I did it on the schoolhouses of Calais, because although I live in East Montpelier, this schoolhouse is the one I identify most with, and it is in Calais.
Some went to Plainfield for
And-
high school.
Yeah. So some students in this area went to Plainfield for high school. Gail is sharing. So, yeah.
My sister and I got a ride with Floyd Fitch, who delivered the mail. This is from the Maple Corner area. And we would ride to school with him.
Okay, so Floyd Fitch would deliver mail in the area, the Maple Corner area, and you'd get a ride, and a few kids would hop on and get a ride to school. And where did you go to school?
Well, I went to Maple Corner School
Cool.
until I was 12, and then we went to
Okay, yeah, so from the Maple Corner schoolhouse and then to the Montpelier High School, yeah.
And then, I think John Holman taught there to make the corner school, I don't know if that was before you were there, and he eventually became commissioner of education.
Yes. No, I didn't. I wasn't in school. My later sister-in-law, Dorothy Morse, Dorothy Aiken Morse.
We're gonna wrap up pretty soon, so that as we're picking up chairs, this will be a little bit of an opportunity to flip through the scrapbooks. That maybe some of this history has piqued your interest. It's mostly earlier history than these scrapbooks date to, but many of the people in the scrapbooks date a little earlier. There are mentions of older generations and celebrations of 90th birthdays. There are obituaries and all sorts of articles of note. But one piece with the schoolhouse, as you know, we're not in Vermont all going to one-room schoolhouses. We have more and more consolidation, a trend toward that way. So when the schoolhouse didn't have any students anymore, the town of Calais made the decision, or I don't know how it was made, but that the community could use this building, and as long as that they used it for community functions and kept the building in good repair, it could be for the community, and if that was no longer the case, it would go back to the town to do with this building what they would. So there's been a lot of efforts and care and energy put into this building, as you might be able to look around and see. I guess I'm going to close with reading another story. This is the story of the Adamant Beanhole Beans, written in July 1995 by Carla Straight. So the Beanhole Bean Supper in Adamant was held here up until somewhere around 20 years ago. And the bean hole is right out the window over there. Okay, the story of the Adamant Beanhole Beans. The Adamant Community Club in Adamant, Vermont, where you're all sitting right now, has been holding its annual chicken barbecue for about 30 years at that point, 1995. The menu consists of barbecued chicken, coleslaw, warmed Mangy's bakery rolls, baked beans, and lemonade. Pretty standard fare for a summer cookout, but in Adamant, the real drawing card is the beans. Not just any beans, these are bean-hole beans. Bean preparation begins the day before the barbecue itself. By 7 a.m., the outdoor bean-hole work begins. The aluminum roofing is removed from the top of the rectangular 5-foot deep brick-lined pit and laid aside. Wooden pallets are burned over the bean hole to generate coals. By 9 a.m., the beans are undergoing their initial stovetop simmering inside the community club. If you maybe saw the pink stove in there, that's where the beans have gotten their initial boiling for quite some time. This is a former one-room schoolhouse around the corner from the Adamant Music School. 40 pounds of dried beans go into the usual recipe. Once you can blow the shell off a bean, they're ready for the next step. The beans are transferred to 2 25-gallon stainless steel pots, of which this trash can is one of them. As you can see, it's got handles. If anyone knows where the second 25-gallon beanhole bean pot is, we don't and would love to know, or where to get a similar one. The beans are transferred to 2 25-gallon stainless steel pots. Seasonings, onions, and salt pork are added along with enough water to keep them going overnight. The pot lids are put in place and the pots are soaked on the outside to keep them from scorching. Aluminum foil is wrapped around the pots and secured with wire to keep the lids on. Once the pit is filled with coals and the beans are ready in their pots, the coals are dug out of the pit using shovels with 10-foot handles. Remember, the bean hole is 5 feet deep, and it is very hot. And are piled on top of the aluminum roofing for safety, as in we don't want to burn down the building or surrounding area. 2 people using long chains with large hooks lift the bean pots by their handles into the fiery pit, which someone sitting here was one of those people. My dad, Rick Barstow.
Myself and Greg Pelchuk were part of the fire department.
Yes.
Decided that we would wear our fire turnout gear when we were putting the beans down in the pot, and that was very helpful.
So Rick and Greg Pelchuk, volunteers on the volunteer fire department, would gear up as if they were going into a burning building so that they could handle the coals in the bean pit. After the pots are settled in, the hot coals are shoveled back into the pit and covered with the aluminum roofing, dirt, and a recycled insulated door. An opening is left for air to enter to feed the coals, and by 12:30 p.m. the beans are left to bake. So that was at least 5.5 hours so far. At noon the next day, 24 hours later, the pit is reopened and the beans are removed. So the beans have been, the coals have been formed, they've been shoveled out, they've been shoveled in, and now they're shoveled out again. The outside of the pots are cleaned up and the beans are ready for their appearance. At the afternoon barbecue, they're served right out of their pots onto plates or into containers to go. even though it's called the chicken barbecue, we all know the real reason for the meal, those whole beans.
Just as a matter of talking about the cooperative and the cooperative principles, and one is cooperation among co-ops. And when I was working at Plainfield Co-op, Marty used to, some years, Marty would order the beans through us. We would get the dried beans for the admin.
Yellow eyes?
For the
Were
admin.
they yellow eye beans?
Huh?
Were they yellow eyes?
Yeah.
When did Mrs. Barstow take over making the vegetarian beans? Because they were really wonderful.
Well, okay, I am vegetarian. I didn't dare ever suggest that, but someone on the board did say it, and then we had a vote, and it was very controversial. So then we did 2 pots, one vegetarian, one not, and that would have been, oh my goodness, probably, it was after that, so maybe 98, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great addition. And they did. You know who always went to this? Bill Doyle was always here. At the same time, he was at other places.
What about Mary Jo Skinner? She was here too, right?
Mary did, she did, yeah.
When did this school stop being used as a school?
That's a great question. I don't have that piece of paper with the exact date in front of me, but I do recall that it stopped being used as a school maybe late 30s, early 40s, so soon after the store became a cooperative store. But wait. But then there were some students again, so it reopened for a short time. And it's a little fuzzy to me because I've heard that the school closed more towards the 60s, and then the whole bean supper here started in about 1965, at least. So there's some gap that I would need to do more research about. Do you have some?
Right, this is from a newsletter called, Ever-Changing Adamant. And this was written in 1984. And it says that the class of 1941 was the last class and was made up of Ina Toby, Lois Slayton, Grace Lawrence, and it was to be the last graduating class until 1954 when the school was reopened for 1 year only.
I just had a question. Does anybody know what the status is on the Methodist Church? Because I moved here in '84, and the red flannel hash fall supper was something I never experienced, and I never missed a chance to go to it. And I was very sad when that happened to go by the wayside. I still don't know what the heck red flannel hash is, but it was very tasty. And the brown bread that they served was also great. So I'd love to know if anybody knows what the status is.
I just wanted to add that I was here in '96, I think, for the Bean Supper, and there were 2 lines. And I was advised which one was a vegetarian.
We'll get back to your question about the status of the Adamant Methodist Church in a moment. I'll let.
I remember pitching in with members of the community on the whole beans and all the coals and everything. Last I knew, the big long shovels that we always used were always kept in the basement.
Okay.
And I remember helping fix a plumbing leak or something here 10 or 12 years ago. They were still here. And kind of another interesting possible piece of history. I don't know this for certain, but I was told that the origin of those big long shovels, they were kind of strange. They had a tip shaped like a spoon, and they were called spoon shovels. And I was told by one of the old timers that they belonged to the electric co-op, that when the power was brought to the area in the 40s, it was before heavy equipment, so the way that they would dig the deep holes was to scoop it with the shovels. And then when they became obsolete, they've been given here for the whole beans. I don't know if that's true, but it's kind of an interesting story. Last I knew, they're still in the summer.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I guess there's lots of cross-pollination between cooperatives and this whole bean supper, with Ellen sharing that oftentimes the 40 pounds of beans would be ordered in bulk from the Plainfield Co-op to come to Adamant, and that if this old story that Trevor related is so, that the 10-foot long handled shovels were used by the Washington Electric Co-op until they became obsolete with the advent of heavy equipment coming to the electric cooperative, which was formed out of the Adamant Cooperative. And while the Adamant Cooperative is the oldest food co-op in the country and in the state and believed to be in the whole country, the Washington Electric Co-op is the oldest electric co-op in the state of Vermont as well. So there's lots of intersection of cooperation in this community and much more history to be investigated.
So Martha Fitch was, is the daughter of. So she's a legacy of cooperatives, because she and I and a bunch of other craftspeople started the Artisans' Hands as a co-op in Montpelier. So she was passing on her co-op legacy.
It's her grandfather that started it. Right.
When was Callis getting electricity then? If you're saying that co-op.
So